just a few weeks ago, as well as winning a Pro Tour qualifier and top 8ing a multitude of other ones. He made the finals of the last Star City Games Open in Atlanta before the Invitational. Just on fire lately, doing really well, and his draft deck's pretty good. He'll be on the play if he so chooses in the quarterfinal matchup here against Chris Seibert. We don't have Chris Seibert's deck list yet. We will try to look at his hand as we go. It looks like he is a blue-white deck to start with. Pretty mana heavy. I think 5 lands in his opener there. A couple of blue-white cards there to go along with it. He's going to ship it back for something a little bit strong.
Yeah, so Chris Seibert pulling the trigger there on the mulligan, and I have to say I like them all. This weekend we haven't seen a lot of people mulligan these 5-landers. Naya Blitz, we saw a few 5-land keeps, some 4-land keeps. So Chris Seibert showing some discipline here with his maul.
Right,
I like it.
And in limited, it's sometimes it's okay to get flooded out in limited if your deck can afford it. If you have a lot of 5, 6, and 7 drops, it's okay to keep the 4-landers. It's okay to keep the 5-landers, especially if they have all your colors, because you're going to draw into some of those bigger cards eventually. Hopefully, help stabilize. And if you have a couple early cards to interact with your opponent to buy you that time. It's not always so bad. However, it looked maybe Chris Seibert just had a couple 2-drops or situational spells, maybe even something like an enchant creature, so it just didn't have like a good target for it yet or something like that. So definitely deciding to ship it back with 5 lands and very little action. May have even been missing a color, since this is primarily a 3-color format. If you are lucky enough to draft a 2-color deck that is solid, I would be proud of you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you don't see it too often, and when you do, those decks are usually 3-0 the pod.
Yeah. So BBD obviously keeping his hand, as he has not shipped it back yet. Seibert looks like he again has a few lands, so he's going to keep this 6. Leading off with a swamp. BBD does have multiple Tithe Drinkers in his deck. Looking to start off here with one of those. There we go. Lifelinker 2/1 out of Dragon's Maze with Extort, a very powerful 2-drop to start the game with off for sure. If Chris doesn't have an early drop to match it, that life gain could ultimately put Brian far enough ahead so that it's impossible for Chris to race later on in the game.
Right, the Extort just provides such amazing reach later, in the late game. So if BBD can get 4 or 6 damage in with this Tithe Drinker, it'll potentially do even more late game.
All right, and there's the Runner's Bane.
So really not the answer you want to the Tithe Drinker, but...
Yeah, he does get to keep the Exor, but, he is going to keep Brian from gaining a significant amount of life just from the lifelink. And I assume a Cluestone's probably coming down here, maybe another 2-drop. Ooh, and there's...
it's a Woodlock Crawler.
Woodlock Crawler, and along with the Extort from Brian. Doesn't look like Chris is playing green, though, so not going to have too much relevance on that protection from green. Another body, a little bit of damage swing from the Extort. Keeping the pressure up. Yeah, and there's the bane of my existence, Hazda Snare Squad. I got it the first time. Hazda Snare Squad.
Nice.
Snare Squad. Yeah.
Yeah. And there he is, the 1/4 for 3. He does his best Horned Turtle impersonation until it becomes time to attack when he taps something down.
Right, and yeah, like me and Glenn were talking about earlier, it's just a great card on both offense and defense. Since it does have 4 toughness, it can block the majority of the early creatures in the format. And then when you are, ready to start attacking, putting in some damage on your opponent, you get to tap down their best blocker, before combat resolves.
Yep, so BBD has a Cluestone and an Extort trigger for his turn. Chris Seibert will match the Cluestone with one of his own and pass the turn.
So it seems like this is going to be a matchup of the big blue decks. Brian has some significant cards for the later game. He has an Asperia Supreme Judge. He also has a couple other sweet 6-drops. He even has a Diluvian Primordial, which can become stronger the better Chris's deck is. It looks like, from what we've seen, Chris is actually just a blue-white deck, so that's pretty interesting. Not splashing another color, so he didn't really have to rely on getting a bunch of guild gates to fix his mana. That means he got to take more powerful cards up the chain. Hopefully we'll get to see some of those more powerful cards in just a few minutes.
Right. BBD has another Extort trigger off the Nav Squad Commando, which you see there on screen, the 3/5 Siege Mastodon. It's going to get detained by Asperia's Skywatch from Chris Seibert, the 3/3 flyer.
And and it wasn't really going to do all that much damage, since it is just a 3-power creature. It's not going to get Battalion this turn out of Brian's deck. Was going to get blocked by the 3/4 anyway. Here comes another Extort trigger, and you really see how that Extort's starting to add up. Chris down to 16 just from that Tithe Drinker's triggered ability alone. Brian all the way up to 24. While Chris has that flyer, Brian's already negated at least 1 attack from it.
Yeah, and he's taken 4 points off Chris's life total. sometimes matches are decided without a player entering the red zone.
Very rarely, but I've seen it happen, especially with Extort. Basilica Guard's one of the more powerful cards out of Gatecrash Limited. The 1/4 body, even though he has Defender, incredibly potent against the 3/1 creatures and the 2/1 creatures out of the Boros style decks. But yeah, Brian I think should be at 24 here. I'm not sure if they have life totals marked correctly. And then Chris should be at 16. But yeah, there we got that down. He took 3 from the Skywatch and follows that up with said Basilica Guards. So now he's got an Extort creature of his own. But these Nav Squad Commandos are about to get real big. Although BBD would have to throw his 2/1 under the bus to get in that 8 damage. Not sure if it's correct to do so, but it certainly is a good option.
Right. He also has the Clue Stone available to him. If he needs more gas, he can go digging with that.
Yep. So a lot of options for Brian. Sacking the Clue Stone gives him, like you said, that extra draw step, but it does take up 2 of his mana. He wouldn't be able to cast anything bigger than a 4 or 5 drop. So those 6 drops and 7 drops in his deck, not really online if he decides to sack the Clue Stone for this turn. He does have access to 6 mana without the Clue Stone, so he wouldn't be able to cast a Primordial without another land if he decided to sack the Clue Stone. But every spell he casts from now on, almost certainly going to be able to drain his opponent for 1 life.
And here we go. It looks like a 6 drop.
Well, probably a 5 drop with an Extort trigger.
Okay.
All right, so there's a far and away. This card is going to be insane. So I assume he's probably bouncing, that guy, and then, his opponent has to choose between sacrificing his 3/3 flyer or his 1/4. So this is pretty brutal for him. If he sacrifices his 1/4, he's going to get cracked for 10 damage down to 6 life.
Huge turn for BBD, and so now you see why he first picked this far and away. It can just create these awesome combats. Chris Seibert seemed like he was okay with these 2 1/4s, but really he's getting punished for it.
Yeah, and this is really showing the type of game that Brian's deck can play. Brian, mostly a control deck. He has a lot of big drops with the Clue Stones to really accelerate into, but he also has a lot of 2 drops, and along with those 2 Nav Squad Commandos, he's able to attack for a lot of damage this turn. And you see, Chris was really put into a situation where if he sacked his Basilica Guards, he's not getting any value during this combat, and he's just going to get cracked for 10 damage. So I feel like that was probably the correct play in sacrificing the 3/3 flyer, but far and away just got so much value.
It really did. It's painful to sack that 3/3 flyer, but it's what Chris had to do to preserve that life total.
Yeah, and it looks like BBD is currently on empty as far as his hand is concerned. He's able to attack with the 2 commandos, dealing 3 damage, while the 1/4 is able to stifle the 3 damage from the other one.
Right. So Chris Seibert, another plains for him, off the top. We'll see what he can do with it.
He has a gold card in hand. It kind of looks like Follow the Gavel. That could be kind of important later in the game. I'm not sure if that's what it is. It could just be an island on the far right, but it looks like a gold card.
Yeah, it's a blue-white card. I was trying to figure that one out myself.
It might be a new prop guild. I can't tell. I'm just going to stop speculating. I think it's Follow the Gavel, though. And that 7 life point swing that he could gain off that could be insane for him. Oh, nope, it is...
Oh, that's the vigilance. That's the vigilance flyer, I believe. Let me find the name of that guy. 1/5 Sphinx.
Oh, is that Gel and Sphinx?
I think it is.
I thought Gel and Sphinx was mono blue, but I could be wrong. If that is Gel and Sphinx, then yep, that's him. And so Gel and Sphinx, a great attacker, because he has the vigilance and the flying, and he's able to pump all the rest of your creatures whenever you decide to start putting pressure on your opponent. Another prime example of a creature from Dragon's Maze that is great at both offense and defense.
Right, and the Gel and Sphinx, it fills that hole that the blue-white Skies deck so desperately needs, both a defensive creature and something that can turn around and go on offense if it needs to.
Right.
Great card.
Yeah, very similar to the Hazda Snare Squad that we saw get bounced with the Far and Away just moments ago. Yeah. So not Follow the Gavel, not going to be as big of a blowout as I originally thought. Brian, content here to just attack with this 2/3 power, 5 toughness creatures. Expecting his opponent to bounce, back and forth off of them. Brian probably doesn't have a combat trick, just running a little bit of the bluffs here. Looks like he does have something post-combat, though.
Looks like a Windrake plus an Extort trigger.
And an Extort trigger. And Chris Seibert was able to offset one of those Extort triggers last turn with his own Basilica Guard, but Brian's still ahead as far as extorting his opponent goes.
Yeah, 22-12 in BBD's favor.
At this point, Brian does have the Windrake, which can attack freely into the Jellin Sphinx without fear of dying, which will turn on the 2 Nav Squad Commandos to become 4 power creatures in combat, making the Basilica Guards and the Hazda Snare Squad not really able to block.
Yeah, they could keep back these 3/5s, but not for long. BBD was going to find a creature that could attack profitably eventually.
So now BBD has another land in hand from what I've seen. He's probably looking here to draw one of his bigger drops over the next couple turns. Preferably the Asperia, since it's such a big flyer. That Skymark Rock, though, gonna be bouncing his 2/1, but that 2/1 not really doing a whole lot against the Basilica Guards anyway. Also an Extort trigger. Let's make sure we say that.
And in case you guys didn't know, we're giving away a lot of premium in this top 8. We're giving away 3 months in the quarters, we're giving away 6 months in the semis, and a full year in the final. So if you guys were going to change...
I can't even count that high. How many total months is that?
That's like 28, 38, 58. I don't know, something ending in 8 for sure.
21? That's a lot.
It is a lot of months.
A lot of months of premium. P. Hofling just likes giving money away. So all you people who want to earn some premium, we're going to be asking some trivia after this game. Maybe involved with a couple things.
Wow, look at this Bluster Squall from BBD.
Bluster Squall, more like Blowout Squall,
yeah,
right?
More like Scoop 'em Up Squall.
Yeah, not quite lethal. He's going to be able to attack here for 12. Actually, the Exort trigger does do 13. Okay, that is actually going to be game. I actually miscounted from the Exort trigger. That's 13 whole points of damage in one swoop, and you see just how powerful Bluster Squall can be, especially on those cluttered board states against the very defensive decks, like the blue-white decks, like the Orzhov decks with a lot of Basilica Guards and those types of creatures.
That's right. Kenny Castor described it to me as the new Cryptic Command, or rather, the good part of Cryptic Command, at least for limited.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Kenny Castor,
hyperbole
exaggerates.
Yeah. Most people exaggerate. It's a common theme with people.
Hey, if we didn't exaggerate, we wouldn't be back here, would we?
That's not true. I don't exaggerate that much. I just tell how it is. If someone's bad, I'll say, yeah, that guy's pretty bad.
Just like that. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Okay, guys, so
I'm getting needled so bad right now.
Like I was saying before, 3 months of Starseed Games Premium up for grabs right now.
How many days is that? Well, I guess it depends on the month. Okay.
Yeah.
So
and the year, too.
Oh, wow.
Sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. All right, so the question for the first round of 3 months of premium: what southeastern U.S. city is hosting its first ever Grand Prix? Hint, it's being run by Star City Games.
Yeah, it is. And, if you don't know, we've been talking about it all weekend, so figure it out, put your thinking cap on, and think back to what we've been talking about.
And we want to see those answers on Twitter.
Right.
Make sure you use the hashtag SCG Premium. That's all you need to put on there with the answer is SCG Premium. You don't need to tweet at me. You don't need to tweet at Zach, but feel free to.
Yeah.
I always like getting notifications. It makes me feel important.
There it is, right there. Yeah.
Whoop.
I think that's why we're all on Twitter, isn't it?
Whoop, there it is.
Also, you can use the hashtag Whoop if you want to go for added spice. Todd would appreciate it. Yeah.
No, okay. How about this?
Value.
You get entered into a second drawing to be ahead of all the other people in the drawing if you hashtag Whoop.
That's not true.
It's not
but
true.
But you can still hashtag Whoop.
You can. We will like you for it.
Yeah, so make sure you get this in with SCG Premium. Make sure it's before the quarterfinals are over.
And once again, the question, what southeastern U.S. city is hosting its first ever Grand Prix? And hint, StarCityGames.com is running the event.
That's right. So
all right.
Get that in, SCG Premium. But right now, we're going to go back to the match.
Yep. And we are announcing the winner right after the match. So, if this game ends with a mulligan to 0, and it ends real fast, maybe the first 20 people will get in. The second 20, not so much.
Oh, I already see a couple whoops there. Let's get this trending. What do you think?
Yeah, sure. Whoop, there it is, right there. So for those spelling it W-O-O-P, it's actually W-H-O-O-P, but I'll accept either.
Well, we might have to disqualify you from the premium drawing if you
if you put the wrong hashtag. I think actually the original version was Whoop. There it is with the M.
Nah, not our version. Our version is W-H-O-O-P.
I don't care, man. This is relevant. Roll Tide's the new YOLO.
Oh, yeah. So here you see BBD carefully pile shuffling here. Chris Seibert.
Yeah. I think he's actually mulligan to 6. He did take a look at his opening hand. So BBD going to be on the mulligan this time, whereas Chris is keeping his opener, it looks like. So a little bit of taste of the other side. We don't have any more whoops yet? Aw.
We got a couple whoops.
All right, I'll take it. Couple whoops. That'll make my day.
So, you know what? A lot less sideboarding in this format than there is in sealed deck. In sealed, you see a lot of tweaking, a lot of sideboarding, changing
Right.
colors even. Draft, though, generally people's decks are more streamlined, and they know what they're going to expect.
It looks like BBD has a couple lands, a Far and Away, and a couple 2-drops. I'm not sure if he has access to white mana just yet, but, you know, he could draw one here in the first couple turns. Looks like he's actually just on Mono Swamps. A bunch of blue cards in hand, a Syndic of Tides in hand, a Tide Drinker in hand, neither of which really match up well against his opponent's Hazda Snare Squad.
Hazda. I think it's more about the back of the throat with the Hazda.
Oh, you're killing me, man.
You got to work on it.
Yeah.
That's all.
All right, so BB does draw the Plains, which allows him to play a Cluestone. Didn't know that was in his hand. That should help him get his blue mana, make his draw much more smooth.
So Hazda in for 1 drops BBD to 19.
Bang.
First blood.
Yep, but does not have a follow-up threat, so not really a lot of pressure on Brian. He has a lot of time here to build up his resources. He's going to start playing some of those extra creatures, hopefully, followed by, looks like, Last Thoughts on the far right of his hand. If he gets that on a Windrake, that could be pretty strong.
Yeah. Oh, okay. So he decides to just go with the, sorry, not the Syndic, the Tithe Drinker.
Sure.
He's just going to play for the long game here, get as many extort triggers as possible.
I mean, that's fair. He could. It might be that what I thought was the Windrake was actually the the Last Thoughts, and if he has just white cards in hand really to cast, that's it's better to get that guy into play. BBD does have the Far and Away in his hand. Here he's probably actually just going to untap, bounce the sky, or make him sacrifice the Skymark Rock and getting rid of, bouncing the Snare Squad and making him sacrifice the Rock.
Yeah, the Rock is such a premium uncommon, premium flyer, such a fast clock, and bounce
Did you
that
know?
Tithe Drink.
Did you know what the Rock says?
I know what he's cooking, but I don't know what he says.
No, you smell what he's cooking,
Oh.
and you should know what he says.
I sure don't.
Yeah, well, shame on you,
I only play card sports. Magic the Gathering for life.
dude. That professional wrestling, not really a sport. I know that maybe some people might get mad at me for that. I used to watch it all the time. I'm not gonna lie. It was great when I was a kid, but we've grown up. It's okay.
Well, you've grown up.
Maybe a little.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Dispel in Chris Seibert's hand. So.
Oh, that's gross. So BBD not main phasing his Far and Away here. That Dispel going to cause him some trouble. And I'm surprised BBD is letting this resolve. Oh no!
Wow,
Yeah, he's got
Predator.
Skyline Predator, and he must. I think he drew that this turn because I was just expecting him to cast Far and Away and to really punish his opponent, but this punishes it way more. Blue-white doesn't have a whole lot of ways to get that Skyline Predator off the table before combat. Maybe just like an Azorius Charm. The bounce spell gain 2 life.
Dramatic Rescue.
Yeah, Dramatic Rescue. And no follow-up for Chris.
Wow.
This is bad.
Just sits on Eyes in the Skies as well as Dispel, which those pale in comparison to a 3/4 flyer.
Correct. The Dispel is going to be able to keep BBD's Far and Away from really blowing him out too badly. He's able to cast Eyes in the Skies as well as hold up for Dispel. So while it's looking pretty good for BBD, this really could be anyone's game. That Skyline Predator pretty strong in the air. But Chris is a blue-white deck. He could have a couple ways to gain life, a couple ways to stall here with this Eyes in the Skies. Buy him a lot of time to find his bigger drops.
Yep, so Eyes in the Sky comes out. 2 1/1 bird tokens for Chris Seibert. He faces down the Syndic, the Tithe Drinker, and the 3/4 flyer.
All right, it looks like he does have an Asperia Skywatch in hand, so you will be able to detain the Skyline Predator for a turn should he draw a land. Along with that Dispel in hand, I think he has a Tristani's Judgment. I think that's the white card in the middle of his hand. Nope, I think that's actually a Night's Watch. So hard to discern some of these cards, with the very little we get to see of the picture, especially in Limited when there are so many pictures that you're not completely familiar with and constructed, all these decks. We not only do we see their deck list before we start playing, but we also get to know what the pictures look like just from seeing them all the time.
Right, pretty easy to tell an Avacyn's Pilgrim from a Thragtusk. A little more difficult to tell a Night's Watch from a, I don't know,
Tristani's Judgment,
anything.
it's not like we can see all the mana costs perfectly or anything like that. But BBD does have a sizable force here. 2 creatures with Extort. You know, the Hazda Snare Squad being able to tap down the blocker, not entirely relevant. He does get to get in the 1 point of extra damage, and following it up here with Runner's Bane on the Tidesringer, similar to his play last game. Not excited about this. The Extort still able to go on the stack from BBD's side, and not a whole lot Chris can really do about Extort creatures from a blue-white deck, other than maybe a Supreme Verdict or some sort of, like, you know, combat trick that, you know, puts him into a bad position and, you know, kills it in combat. But 5 damage here from Brian, putting Chris all the way down to 11, and then multiple Extort creatures off his next few spells is going to put him very low on life.
Yeah, just really not a great matchup for Chris. He has all these 1/3s, 1/4s, but versus Extort, all the toughness in the world is not going to save him.
Yep, and that's one of the disadvantages to playing a 2-color combination in this format, is you don't get access to a lot of the splash removal spells. Like, for example, if you're just playing a blue-green deck, you don't have access to Putrefy,
right?
You know, and various things like that, where, you know, if you just took a few guild gates, maybe decided to delve into a different guild a little bit, you'd have access to maybe a few better cards in your deck. Not to say that Chris's deck is necessarily bad, but, you know, it seems hard for him to really answer any of the things Brian has in play.
Oh, well, the Asperius Skywatcher, that'll help. That'll detain the Skyline Predator for 1 turn at least, stopping the bleeding. Looks like it ended for an inspiration for BBD.
With the double Extort.
Yeah, super powerful.
Yeah, so he does get to draw 2 and Extort twice, putting Chris down to 9. The Skyline Predator not going to be able to attack, though, since it is detained. Are you not detained?
I am not detained.
Oh, okay. Well,
Skyline Predator is.
Yeah, Skyline Predator's detained. He's pretty content at the moment. We're going to do a couple more Gladiator puns here in a few minutes while we talk about BBD's hand. Far and away, going to be pretty strong here if he decides to main phase it, you know, play around Dispel, maybe bounce the Hazda Snare Squad. You know, he could just progress his board a little further, do some more extorting. There looks like a Clue Stone, and he's going to pay 2 there and extort, putting Chris all the way down to 7.
Here you can see these Clue Stones, you can easily just write them off as mana sources, but in an Extort deck, every one is so much better.
Yeah, so Chris all the way down to 5 here. Those 2 creatures with Extort just paying, you know, such a huge toll on Chris's life total. And honestly, if he doesn't have a big spell here to take control of this game, he's just going to lose to those Extort creatures, because BBD has 2 more spells in hand.
Right, and 2 cards in the bank with those Clue Stones, too.
Yeah, and it's, you know, it's going to be, he doesn't have an Extort creature of his own. You know, it seems like he's a very defensive deck, but it's defensive mostly with creatures and not really with answers.
That's right. He's hoping that his opponent is just playing a bunch of small creatures, some vanilla creatures. He's not really prepared to deal with the non-combat ways of winning or spells.
Yeah, and should Brian actually empty his hand and Chris somehow survive, that Duskmantle Guildmage is going to pose a huge problem for Seibert. Just for 7 mana, you know, BBD can deal him a few points of damage. Should a creature die in combat on Chris's side, you know, something like that, that's just compounding damage over and over from the Duskmantle Guildmage. You know, if a card is put into the graveyard from anywhere, just for 3 mana, they lose 1 life, so BBD will probably do that. You know, after blocks, before damage, after he sees some stuff. And I do think tokens count as cards hitting the graveyard, even though they get exiled once they go to the graveyard. I'm not positive on that. We might have to get a ruling, but I'm pretty sure that's how it works.
I think if it said if a permanent hits the graveyard, but since it says a card, a token's not a card, so I don't think that would trigger.
Well,
we'll get confirmation
I'm
from
to ask a judge. So Chris still at a life total, probably not going to end up mattering. BBD does have the option, though, to just mill him for 2 and dome him for 2. You know, the way that the rest of his cards are panning out, you know, he does have the Skyline Predator, which means that Chris is probably just going to have to chump block with his Asperius Skywatch, and that's always a terrible proposition.
Yeah, it is. And then, you know, he can activate the Duskmantle Seer to make Chris pay for that even more. It's really pretty tough.
Right.
Tough situation for Chris. He needs to rip something like a Supreme Verdict here.
Yeah, and actually, a Supreme Verdict would just kill him, because Brian could activate the Duskmantle Guildmage.
Yeah.
Chris Seibert puts a bunch of his own creatures into the yard, you know, as well as the Supreme Verdict hitting the yard too. Oh, I guess it would. The creature or Duskmantle Guildmage would go away before that happens, so it's not like a lasting effect. I think if Duskmantle Guildmage goes away, the effect goes away. A lot of weird cards here, but a far and away here from Brian with kicker, as it will, with Fuse. Gonna get dispelled. But I think he did activate the Guild Mage before casting it.
I think he activated the 3-mana ability of the Guild Mage and was able to extort 1 time. So that plus the Dispel going to the yard means that Chris loses 2, Brian gains 1.
Right. And, Chris all the way down to 3 here. Brian has 2 creatures with Extort and a Duskmantle Seer. Here, this is a spot where if Chris is able to top deck a Supreme Verdict, which we don't know whether or not he has, we haven't seen his deck list, that could, help him out. I actually forgot the 2 bird tokens that are in play, along with the Spear Skywatch, can trade with the Skymark Rock, but Chris will be taking even more damage after that from the ability of the Duskmantle Guild Mage.
Right, which has already been activated this turn.
All right, we'll see what Brian decides to do. A pretty tough situation for Chris and a complicated situation for Brian. He's trying to figure out the best way to kill Chris without putting himself at risk of losing any of his creatures. And I think attacking with the Skyline Predator is probably a decent bet. I wonder if BB is actually thinking to himself whether or not the tokens trigger once they hit the yard. Maybe he already knows, maybe not, but I think regardless if he attacks, Chris is probably going to take some damage. Apparently, we just got a ruling. Tokens do not trigger from the Duskmantle Guild Mage, so if he attacks and Chris decides to just chump block with one of the bird tokens, he will stay at 3 life.
Right, so it looks like just the Predator coming in. What's Chris going to do about it?
Alright, well, he's tapping 3 mana. It looks like he's casting a spell, which is going to deal him another damage. Looks like...
I am not even sure what that spell is.
Oh, man, I actually need a list. I forgot. Oh, man.
What's it do?
I don't know. Can we ask the judge which card that was, just so we know? I know it's one of those cards that it's a very situational, like Fog-esque type card. I think it gains some life as well. I think it's like Fog plus gain a life for each attacking creature. Riot Control. Can we get that up on the screen real quick? Riot Control coming right up so we can see exactly what it does. I'm pretty sure it's prevent all damage to you this turn, and you gain a life for each attacking creature, or maybe even each tapped creature. Right. Alright, so you 3 mana, prevent all damage that would be dealt to you this turn, so a fog-based type effect, and you gain 1 life for each creature your opponent controls. So a reasonable gain life spell there. He actually ended up gaining 4 life, not just the 1 from the attacking creature, putting him all the way up to 6.
And here is that Knightly Valor we were talking about earlier. Goes on the Asperia's Skywatch and makes a 2/2 Knight.
Sure, and that's going to hit Brian for 5 points of damage. He's contemplating attacking with the bird tokens, but he changes his mind, thinks better of it, wants to hold back those tokens to block, putting Brian down to 14.
Yep, and now Chris is out of cards. He has 1 left in hand, but it is a basic land.
Yeah, and BBD, I think still with a couple cards in hand, a couple spells, going to trigger those effects off of the Extort from the 2 creatures he has in play. Also has the ability to Duskmantle Seer if he really wants to. Chris finally getting that token from the judge to put into play as well.
So BBD has to best figure out how to drain his opponent out, how to play around any potential Supreme Verdicts off the top, Sphinx's Revelations off the top. He wants to make sure that his opponent has no outs in this situation.
Right. And it looks like he's just going to main phase a spell here and do a little extorting, make his opponent pay the price, as it were. But what's the price for greatness?
Wow.
Alright, so that's an Asperia, the Supreme Judge, not the Inscrutable to be confused with the original, but the Supreme Judge. Whenever your opponent attacks you or a planeswalker you control with a creature, you get to draw 1 card per creature that does that. And that's going to keep Chris really from attacking with his 5/5 Flying Vigilance. I mean, he might want to give Brian a card, but that's so dangerous when Brian has access to those 2 Extort creatures.
Right, Chris just getting backed further and further into his corner here. Soon all options are going to be closed to him. He's on 4 life.
Yeah, and again, he is looking for something to break open this game. Something like a Supreme Verdict. Maybe, I think, what's the blue X spell that taps creature? Gridlock. Gridlock?
Yep.
Maybe Gridlock if he's able to get Brian down enough life. With maybe if he attacks for 5 here, puts him to 11, he might have enough power in play with maybe plays an Extort guy, maybe plays a pump spell or something like that. And Brian can gain multiple life just with 1 spell off an Extort. It looks like he does have a Clue Stone in hand, so he has plenty of things to do and plenty of mana to do it with. All right, and it looks like CVM, Chris Van Meter, has taken down game 1 from his opponent, Israel Rivera. Chris Van Meter playing that red, white, blue deck we were talking about. It's a base Boros deck, I believe. Has a couple of blue cards in it. It's really a 3-color deck. He doesn't have a lot of great mana fixing, but you know, it's a pretty strong list from what we've seen. It does take the first game, and that is our secondary feature match, and we will be cutting to that if this game ends in the next few minutes.
Yep, and it sure looks like it's going to. BBD just has to figure out what Chris Seibert might have in his hand.
I almost bet I would bet some, you know, small, maybe like a slice of pizza or something right here, that BBD just asked about the tokens with the Duskmantle Guildmage, because that's a very you know, unintuitive interaction.
Right.
It's, you know, tokens are very strange. For example, like if I have a token creature and you have a Leyline of the Void, that token isn't a card, so it hits the graveyard and exiles your bridges from below if you're the person controlling the bridges and the Leylines of the Void. But it looks like Brian had enough to just put it away for Chris. I'm not sure exactly what the exchange was there.
Either way, Chris just had no chance in that game. He couldn't deal with the 2 extort creatures or the Asperia, or really even BBD's steady stream of card advantage from those Clue Stones.